Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another video. My name is NGS. Thank you so much for clicking on the channel. As I'm sure you can tell by the slight incoherent nature of my voice, it is currently 1 o'clock on the dot a.m. here in New York on the morning of July 3rd, 2019, and your boy is slightly inebriated because he just got back from the bar after pounding out 4 Long Island iced teas. Hey, what can I say? Applebee's half-price Long Island iced teas. Hey man, it is what it is. I know a lot of people don't like going to commercial restaurants, but when you got half-price Long Island iced teas, you know your boy. Hey, he's going to indulge. Also, before we get into the video, anybody in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, heck, even maybe Massachusetts, would y'all be interested in doing a meetup this summer in August where we all get together at a bar and reflect on life, throw back a few drinks? Comment down below and let me know because I'm thinking about doing that. Anyways, that being said, the topic for today's video on something that I should actually sleep on and formulate my thoughts and be coherent about it is going to be on Spider-Man Far From Home. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, straight from the bar, I'm going to be giving you guys my slightly tipsy movie review, which I don't think I've ever done before. So this is going to be very exciting. And by excited, I mean, I'm so sorry in advance for me slurring my words. Anyways, now, it should be no shocker to anybody that I am actually a really big Spider-Man fan. If you guys have been following my channel for a while, you would know that I am a huge fan of the web slinger. You know, dating back to my videos talking about the reboot, I remember I was one of the first people here on the internet talking about how I was excited about, Mark Webb crafting his own interpretation of the character and Andrew Garfield signing on to the character, and then going from there, talking about how I was excited to see him joining the MCU, and just everything since then. Like, this right here should be no shocker to anybody to show my dedication to the character. I love Spider-Man. I seriously do. Spider-Man is my personal hero, and I'm not saying that just to earn clicks and to show that, hey, I'm a really big fan of the character. No, Spider-Man literally is a character that growing up I've idolized and I have so much respect for, regardless of how many times Marvel Comics and their editors have screwed him over. I literally love Spider-Man. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics and literally crying at some of the stuff that Peter Parker has went through because it has become so relatable. And despite how many times I've, leveled criticisms and complaints towards Marvel Comics, and heck, even since we're on the topic of the movies, something like the Raimi trilogy, which, I have back there over there in my movie collection, I let it be known that I have my problems with the Raimi trilogies. I have my problems with the web duology, but at the end of the day, I love the Spider-Man character, and despite the issues I have with the movies, I still love them because I still love this character. And that's one thing I loved about the MCU interpretation of Spider-Man. When I first saw him debut in Civil War and then in Homecoming, I was really excited about the future of this character. Sure, I knew just right off the bat it was going to be different. It was going to be different because when you have 3 different Spider-Man movies in less than 20 years, 3 different actors, how in the world are you going to differentiate it to the point where you have to convince the audience that, hey, this Spider-Man is worth checking out, especially considering that this Spider-Man is coming, less than 2-3 years after the last one? That is a tremendous monumental undertaking that, Kevin Feige and his team have basically set up upon themselves, and they actually succeeded with Spider-Man Far From Home. I love Spider-Man Far From Home. I loved a lot of things about it. I loved the Vulture. I loved Michael Keaton as the character. I love the aesthetic. I love the tone and the vibe of Spider-Man Spider-Man Homecoming. See, this is what I was talking about when I said I was inebriated. 4 Long Island iced teas later, and your boy Dio was kind of like, cuckoo, where the bitch is at. Anyways, I loved Spider-Man Far From Home. Homecoming, god dang it. You see, where else are you gonna get this type of raw quality reviews on YouTube? Most people will be like, oh, I'm just gonna edit that out. No, your boy is gonna watch back on this video tomorrow morning and be like, what the hell was I thinking? What was I thinking? But yeah, I love Spider-Man Homecoming for a lot of reasons, and there were some things that I didn't like, but I thought that, this was the foundation, this is the groundwork for the future. And here we are with Spider-Man Far From Home. We're 2 years out. We're a few months out from Avengers Endgame. And honestly, I watched this movie and I had no expectations for it because I was excited for it as a Spider-Man fan, as I am for every single Spider-Man movie. But at the same time, I kind of had my reservations about it because I felt some of my biggest fears that I had with this interpretation of the character would come to light, and unfortunately they did. So the TLDR version of this video, 5.5 minutes in, is that Spider-Man Far From Home lives up to a lot of the hype that people have for the movie. It is a great Spider-Man movie, but at the same time is not a great Spider-Man movie because I had personally a lot of problems with it. And this review, like I said, is going to come off as so contradicting. Like, you're literally going to watch this video and you're going to be like, oh, you are never happy. You are a nitpicky Spider-Man fan. Like, why are you even on here? Why are you even talking about this character? Now, I'll explain to you guys why. Because this movie, if you are a fan of the MCU interpretation of the Spider-Man character, if you're a fan of what they're going for in terms of how they're establishing the character, and you are a fan of how they're handling it, I think you're going to get a real kick out of it. But if you are a Spider-Man fan and you are really accustomed to like the classic lore and how he's been portrayed in various mediums, especially if you played the recent PlayStation 4 game or if you've seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you might be disappointed with this one because it is very different, extremely different. So let's just get the obvious out of the way. This is literally, in terms of tone, in terms of structure, very similar to Spider-Man Homecoming in a lot of respects because it's being directed by the same guy, John Watts, and they've really settled on this John Hughes type of vibe where we're really going to hammer home, this is a kid in high school dealing with problems and things that a normal high schooler would deal with, which on the one hand, I understand and I respect, and that's one of the reasons why I loved Spider-Man Homecoming, because it tackled a lot of those things, and honestly, it's one of the reasons why, it's something I was okay with, but at the same time not, because if you are a Spider-Man fan and you've read the comics before, you know that Peter Parker was really not in high school for a long time. I don't know where everybody got this fixation for that Spider-Man's best stories were in high school, but most of his like premier top tier stories were when he was in college and adulthood onwards. Like, very few Spider-Man stories are very relevant when he was in high school. I mean, we all love the high school aesthetic because it sets him apart from like the other Marvel characters and heroes, but in actuality, it's really not that big a stretch of time. But I was okay with them doing it in Homecoming because in this movie universe, they wanted to differentiate him from the likes of Iron Man and Thor and Captain America and Guardians of the Galaxy, which was okay. I actually thought it worked in a lot of respects. But going into this movie, I feel like the film kind of suffered from a lot of those stereotypical John Hughes type of vibes. Like, they're just trying to make it so, yeah, he's in high school, and they really show that he is in high school, and I didn't like that. I really didn't like that one bit. I would say so far that the entire first half of the movie to me was very forgettable, extremely forgettable, honestly. And I'm thinking right now that's probably because that's the liquor talking and I'm just forgetting certain tidbits of the film. But outside of a few certain scenes in the movie, I really didn't like, none of the stuff in the first half of the movie really grabbed me, if you will. And that's very disappointing because I remember a lot of the stuff from the Spider-Man Homecoming film, and I remember a lot of stuff from the Raimi trilogy, and I remember a lot of stuff from the web series. And this movie, nothing really grabbed me for the most part. A lot of the dialogue and the acting seemed kind of wooden, and in some situations I felt like the acting in the trailer was a lot better, and it was just, they had like better nuances to them and better delivery, which was very strange considering that, that stuff that's ginned up for the trailers, you would think that in the final product it would be much better. But here it just seems like Peter Parker is just kind of whiny and he just wants to be himself and hang out with the girl that he likes and hang out with his friends and go overseas to Europe. And that's essentially the better part of the first half of the movie. Like, if you've seen the trailers for Spider-Man Far From Home, you basically know the gist of the movie outside of the very obvious twist, which I'm going to touch on later. But yeah, nothing in the first half of the movie really grabbed me. There was nothing like, yo, this is genuinely dope. It's great. Everything that you've seen in the first half of the movie was essentially expanded upon from the trailers. And that's a problem that exists in a lot of trailers for Sony Pictures and Columbia, but I'm not going to touch on that. I'm going to save that for a later video if you guys want to see my whole rant on trailer culture, if you will. But the first half of Spider-Man Far From Home, I really didn't like one bit. And not because I thought it was bad, but I just thought it was kind of forgettable, and it was basically by the books, which is the worst part about it, because I'm just looking back and I'm thinking to the Raimi trilogy, you know, a series that I have problems with. I remember so much more from that. Even the worst parts about that, I remember more than Spider-Man Far From Home. You know, the web series, I remember so much more from that than I do from Spider-Man Far From Home's first act. You know, that's very disappointing, extremely disappointing. But when you get to the second part of the movie, that's where things seriously shine. Like, the second part of this movie is just out of this world breathtaking, like top tier MCU stuff. I'm talking about stuff that's for the history books, because there are so many scenes and shots that are just fantastic. And I'm sure, as you guys can tell from this video, it's going to be filled with spoilers, chock full of spoilers. I'm just about to get into spoiler territory right now. The character of Mysterio, Quentin Beck, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is literally ripped from the pages of the comics. Everything that you could have ever loved about the character of Mysterio, and everything that you thought was just too nonsensical and they wouldn't work on film and just I don't believe it, works in this movie. This is what I love about the MCU. This is what, regardless of what you say, like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, the MCU has built a brand. It's built a lineage to the point where they can give you comic accurate depictions of the characters and make them work in 2019 in a $200 million blockbuster movie. Mysterio, the guy with a fishbowl helmet, who has a fetish of getting people to notice him, who has a love for theatrics. They did that to a T in this movie, and it's so fucking beautiful. As a major fan of Mysterio, if I could cry, if I had the emotions for that, I would be crying, because they made it work. They didn't have to sacrifice anything about his character, and I fucking loved it, because we've come such a long way. We seriously have. From the days where we couldn't get comic accurate depiction of the characters and we had to make them real and relatable. And we get Mysterio, fishbowl and all in this movie. And it's so cool. And his depiction and how he works with the other characters in the movie and how they tied into the MCU is just fan-freaking-tastic. I know there's going to be some blowback from people and how they're saying how it ties too closely into the MCU and Iron Man. And honestly, I understand those type of things, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's okay. I think it works out well because of how great the other aspects of the character work. Like, seriously, Mysterio in this movie, everything that is larger than life about him just unfolds in this movie, and it's just such a treat. It is such a freaking treat. Mysterio is not this character who's trying to get revenge on anybody. He's just this dude who's been wronged, and he just wants to be bombastic. And it's so cool that we're getting characters who are like that. You know, in the last movie, we got Vulture, who was wronged by Tony Stark, and he wants to do things for his family. Here you have Mysterio, who was wronged by Tony Stark, but he's doing things for the betterment of himself and the people who are around him. And it's just so cool because he's not wrapping it up in this noble construct of, oh, I'm just trying to be better for the people around me and they need to know the truth. No, he's just being Mysterio, Quentin Beck, which is so cool. And of course, the twist we all saw coming. Like, you would be dumb to not see that. I know a lot of people compare this to Syndrome from The Incredibles, but I don't really think it's on that same level, considering Syndrome was very different by comparison to Mysterio. And I love the way that they handled the twist in this movie. Like, we all saw it coming. We all did. Like, you'd have to be stupid to not see it coming. But it was great nevertheless. In addition to that, the special effects are definitely a big step up from Spider-Man Homecoming, which is so weird considering the budgets of this movie really aren't that different by comparison. But a lot of the CG looks a lot better in this film, especially in the final acts of the movie. A lot of the fight scenes and the choreography just look insane. Like, if you are a fan of Spider-Man PS4 and you see the final encounters in this movie, Jesus fucking Christ, you feel like you're playing that game. Like, I just wanted to hold up a DualShock 4 and press the buttons along because it is that good. Like, I swear to God, no lie, I feel like they watched some of the fights with Mr. Negative in the PS4 game and they're just like, you know what, let's make a Mysterio version of that. There's so much stuff that is pulled straight from the comics and so much imagery that is just out of this world, and I love it. As a Spider-Man fan, it is fantastic and it is fabulous, and I know I'm gushing over this stuff. I seriously am, because it is worth it. It is seriously worth it, and I love it, and I commend every single person that was a part of this movie for giving us that stuff. Because, like, the scenes in this movie, I saw it in IMAX, and it's breathtaking. You're breathtaking, Keanu Reeves' voice. It's great. It's seriously cool. But that being said, that cannot excuse one of my biggest gripes with the movie, and it was one of the things that I feared it going into the film, and I thought to myself, okay, you know what? After Endgame, they would just touch on this for a little bit, and they wouldn't make it a big deal about the movie. The whole Iron Man Jr. angle. Now, here's the thing. I understand what they're going for with this, but just because I understand it doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Because in this movie, it's all about Peter Parker trying to prove himself as not being the next Iron Man. He doesn't want to be the next Iron Man. He wants to be his own person. By his own person, he means a person with no responsibilities. So in this movie, ironically, he learns the whole with great power comes great responsibility. But at the same time, I feel like that's the same lesson that we learned in Spider-Man Homecoming, where he learned that he wasn't just this kid with the suit from Tony Stark. He was his own person, and he was going to do his own thing because the world needs a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But in this movie, we learn that he's not the next Iron Man. He's just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I feel like we got the same lesson in this movie, and it kind of sucks considering, and this is my biggest problem with the MCU version of Spider-Man, and this is something I think that the Raimi movies and the web movies, because of their lack of, interconnected universes, Spider-Man is his own character. He is. Regardless of what you think, Spider-Man holds himself up. He goes toe-to-toe with Thor and Iron Man and the Fantastic Four and all these larger-than-life characters by himself. This dude from Queens, this broke dude from Queens who is just trying to live and deal with all the struggles and responsibilities of day-to-day life. That was what was most inspiring about Peter Parker's story. It was not the fact that he had powers. It was the fact that he was just a regular Joe Schmo dude dealing through the day-to-day life, the mundane day-to-day life, trying to pay his rent, trying to juggle dealing with a girlfriend and an aunt. That was what was really inspiring about Spider-Man. And it was something that was really hammered home in the Spider-Man cartoons, especially the Spectacular Spider-Man and the PS4 game. And the Spider-Man movies, I feel like they're trying to make it really real and relatable, but to be honest, they come off more like the Nolan movies, where they're just making it real and relatable to the point where it's just so extreme. Like, okay, we have to make it so real and relatable that he has this connection to Tony Stark. And that's what I really don't understand. Like, yeah, Peter Parker was close to Tony Stark in his movies, and he looked up to him and he idolized him and everything. But to the same degree, like, what real connection did he have to this character to the point where they got to craft like this whole movie around him where he's not Tony Stark and we're going to give him Tony Stark's glasses and everything? Like, I get it, but at the same time, Peter Parker was his own character despite all that stuff, And that's what kind of bothers me as a Spider-Man fan, because I feel like Marvel and Kevin Feige and all these people, in the sense that they're trying to make things different for the sake of being different, they're using Spider-Man as a scapegoat, like, hey, he's a kid, so we're going to differentiate him from everybody. And hey, we can use this as an angle to show, like, just because someone's gone, they're not really gone, and you have to learn to move on from it, you know, as opposed to Spider-Man being his own guy. And that's where I'm at, like, this kind of crossroads, because I like what they're going for in terms of from a narrative point of view, but I just don't like how they're using Spider-Man as the scapegoat for it, because Spider-Man is so much more. To me personally, it feels like they're playing the long game, like the really, really, really long game with this character. And that kind of sucks, because Spider-Man deserves more for that. Like, I would hate to see a trilogy of him in high school and a trilogy of him in college and then a trilogy of him afterwards, because it shouldn't have to get to that point. It really shouldn't. Now, I'm not saying you need to, like, wrap up his origin story in 1.5 movies like they did with the other ones. But to the same degree, like, bro, come on now. Seriously, like, I get that he's a kid, but one of the reasons why we grew up looking up to Spider-Man was that he was a kid and he was dealing with all this larger-than-life stuff. That's one of the quintessential moments of the Peter Parker legacy. It's why we love him to this day. It's why he is so synonymous with so many countries around the world, why they make different interpretations of him from Japan to India, because his story is that great and grandiose. So I'm just kind of conflicted, because I like what they're going for in terms of an MCU version of Spider-Man, but I don't like it as a Spider-Man fan, if that makes sense. Even something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where I didn't like that version of Peter Parker. I understood it in the context of Spider-Verse. Here, it's like, we've seen him in Civil War. We've seen him in Infinity War. We briefly saw him in Endgame. We saw him in Homecoming, and now we're in Spider-Man Far From Home. That's 5 appearances right now. Granted, 2 of which are major appearances. Technically 2.5 if you count Civil War. And the character really hasn't grown that much. You know? Like, maybe this really is the long game. Maybe that's what they're going for. Who knows? Anyways, that being said, let me talk about some of the other stuff in the movie that I thought was kind of cool or had issues with. The character of Zendaya. She's playing MJ in this movie. Or Michelle. They openly call her MJ in this, which I thought was very dumb. I feel like if you were gonna make her Mary Jane, just make her Mary Jane. I'm sorry. Like, I don't care about all the racists out there. Like, these racists, like, Falcon is Captain America. Like, they got to get over it at this point, you know. And if Zendaya is Mary Jane, that's what it is. Either you like it or you don't. I think that Zendaya is like a perfect choice to play this type of version of a Mary Jane in this context of the universe. But the fact that they were just pussyfooting around it and like, oh, maybe she is, maybe she isn't, kind of rubs me the wrong way. When it shouldn't, because I love Zendaya. She's great. And in this movie, I loved her so much. She's so adorable. Like, seriously. And shout out to all the tall women out there. You are loved. Seriously, you are loved. I'm like 6'4", tall women. Shout out to y'all. Comment down below if you're a tall woman. But I just love her relationship with Tom Holland in this movie. I seriously did. And I can't wait to see where this develops in the future. But why not make her Mary Jane? Like, what are you really scared about? Like, seriously, just go all in. Don't just push your foot around it. At like the ending of Spider-Man Homecoming, where they're like, my friends call me MJ. Who calls you MJ? Seriously, who actually calls you MJ? Come on now. In terms of other things I kind of liked but didn't, I like the humor in this movie. I thought it was kind of cool, but at the same time, again, it kind of suffers from the MCU. We're gonna take the punchline if there is a punchline, and even if there is a punchline, we're gonna take it. You don't need to do that all the time. It works in a lot of situations, and then it doesn't. Like, come on now. The comics were funny. They had their humor to it, but not to that degree. You know what I'm saying? And it's getting pretty evident at this point. But other than that, the movie as a whole was pretty solid. It was very entertaining. There were a lot of good things about it. The post-credits scene was very, very surprising, to say the least. Which, for those who do not know, again, spoiler territory right now. But in the post-credits scene, it shows that Mysterio actually faked the whole final encounter with him and Spider-Man. He basically made it, it's basically fake news, if you will, where he spinned it out to feel as if Spider-Man was the bad guy all along and he was actually going to murder Mysterio. And he sent that video around to the local news sites. And who got a hold of that? Well, none other than J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons. Yes, they brought J.K. Simmons back, ladies and gentlemen. J.K. Simmons. And not only that, Mysterio revealed, that Spider-Man's true identity is Peter Parker, which is a major bombshell for the future of this universe. A major bombshell. 2 movies in, we know his identity. The world knows his identity, which is a video in and of itself. Wow. But yeah, I'm almost half an hour into this. I cannot believe that I've gotten through this completely inebriated right now. Jesus freaking Christ. Anyways, that was my review on Spider-Man Far From Home. Overall, I think that it had a lot of improvements over Homecoming in terms of like the action, in terms of a lot of things, but in terms of it being a great Spider-Man movie, it's kind of like up and down for the most part. If you love the MCU, you're going to love this interpretation of Spider-Man. If you weren't really feeling it from Homecoming, you might be relieved in some respects, like it's gotten better, but as a whole, I don't know. Anyways, from me for now, my name is NGS. I am about to go chug a ton of water so I don't end up with a hangover. Catch you guys later. Peace.